Hardware refresh on the horizon, a Microsoft license renewal just around the corner, or looking to migrate workloads to Microsoft 365 because it just makes sense? Then this is the episode for you. Today we're going to look at ROI, TCO, and the business case for migrating to Microsoft 365. That's coming up next. This is the IT Factor. Hello and welcome to another new episode of the IT Factor. I'm Dan Kregor, your host. Joining me today is Mr. Lee Foster. Lee is the head of our... hang on, what are you again?
What do you want me to be today? I can be whatever you like. I'm
No, that's not safe. That's not safe. Advisory. I was getting there.
There you go. You got there.
Jeez, such a tough word. Head of advisory. Hey Lee,
good,
how are
Dan,
you?
and you, mate? Very good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Clearly had a bit of a... Yeah, no. Thank you for joining. I'm just having a bit of a senile moment, that's all. Why don't you go ahead and tell the people listening today a little bit about yourself, who is Lee and what does he do?
I was going to put you on the spot then and say, you do it, Dan.
No, please don't.
No, all cool, mate, all cool. Yeah, so yes, quite right. Lee Foster. I head up advisory services globally for Insentra. I am British by origin, been in Australia for 12 years in November. Come very much from a high availability, backup and recovery, data protection type space, then sort of transitioning through my career into all realms of 365, Azure, cloud platforms, open source. What I do for fun, if you're interested in that, is I'm clearly a musician, play music, play a lot of music. For me, it's anything that goes fast and has two wheels. So it's, I ride dirt bikes and mountain bikes. And I just recently, for a fun fact, finished building an electric go-kart for my kids, which is going to be a ton of fun.
All right.
So
yeah,
I like to build and create things.
So it's good to see that the guitars aren't there just as ornamental.
No, they get used and abused, buddy.
Is that a Les Paul I see over your shoulder?
There's one of each. There's a Les Paul, there's a Strat and a Telly.
Strat, yeah.
And down there's a little Mini Martin, a little LX1E, and then an old jumbo. That jumbo guitar I rescued from a skip, if you can believe it or not. And it's one of the ones I play the most often. It's pretty awesome.
Well, I'm a little jealous of your collection back there, but that's okay. That's not why we're here, for me to drool over your guitar collection. We are here to talk, as I said at the top of the show, ROI, TCO. These are sort of buzzwords, buzz acronyms. ROI, return on investment, TCO, total cost of ownership. What we're talking about today is really sort of the financial aspect of the M365 migration, right? Previous episodes we've talked about the technical aspects of what is M365 and we've discussed, migrating Exchange, but we've kind of got a little bit of ahead of ourselves in terms of the assumptions being made by us that you already made the decision and it's approved and you're pushing ahead. But what about if you're at the beginning stages, whether you're a C-level executive that is looking to validate the financial aspect of Microsoft 365, whether you're an IT manager or an IT admin that's looking to put together a business case to push through to move to the cloud. That's kind of what we're talking about today,
yeah,
right? So,
that makes sense.
In terms of that early stages or putting together that business case, Microsoft have an ROI calculator. If you jump online and do a search for M365 ROI calculator, Microsoft have a great tool. But talk us through, if you can, the sort of the basics, where to get started in terms of calculating ROI, TCO, these types of things for a Microsoft 365 migration. Where does it make sense?
Yeah. So, it's probably worth noting that in a lot of instances, the move to public cloud of any kind has been made based on an assumption or a belief or as a tactical response to something, some event, right? That's forced a move. And it's also fair to say that in most cases, the move to, say, let's pick Azure and 365 for this conversation. has been done again to achieve a specific point in time outcome with very little consideration to cost, more around resiliency, speed to market, and those kinds of things. And if you think of COVID moving rapidly to 365 and Teams, I just need to do it quickly. And this seems to be the quickest route to market and to address that need, right? So the ROI, or, I tend to look at that as cloud economics, right? It comes later when they see the recurring bills coming in monthly. It's like, this is significantly more expensive or neutral to where we were, but we're not really reaping the rewards of what we've subscribed to and what we're entitled to. And if you think explicitly 365 and like an E5 license, which you've probably covered, for the most part, people are subscribed and are consuming that license type, but not leveraging any of the capability. So it's almost like if you jump straight to the economics of 365 and public cloud without understanding the journey to get there and what was important and why it was important, it's a hard thing to do, because what you do is you end up saying, well, we've got these workloads in Azure and we've got 3,000 seats of 365 E5. Yes, so what? And how are they being used? How should they be used? So if you sort of take the kind of the financial lens off and put the kind of end user lens on and look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, let's understand, if you look at a well-managed migration into 365 and Azure, the only way, in my view, to do that the right way is with an end-user experience lens, right? So the move, that move to the cloud should consider all of the dimensions of the impact to that end user, right from persona mapping, behavior mapping, security mapping, understanding what Dan does day to day now and how Dan needs to operate once he's sitting in a complete, say again, using that idea of an E5 construct in 365, using workloads in Azure. What does that need to look like, right? Because if that's not understood or misunderstood, and there haven't been any insights surfaced to help justify why that's the case, then you see that's why people find it really difficult to justify. Where we were before was costing X, we're now in 365 and Azure, it's costing Y, but we can't quantify that. There might be 15 DANs that do a specific role and job and need certain tools to do their job, and there's 25 Lees that have very different requirement, very different skills and very different needs. So what we tend to find is it's taken executives to sort of step back, right, and take that advisory view to look at, okay, what are we doing in the cloud? How are we consuming it? Right? Are we getting the return on the subscriptions that we have and the benefits that we're entitled to? And in line with that, do our people have the requisite skills to be able to leverage that capability and entitlement? Because then you've got...
Right, so...
Go, Dan.
I was just going to say, I mean, there's the concept of know your data. We've mentioned that a couple of times on the podcast, right? You need to understand what you've got before you can migrate it. There's also the know your apps, right? In terms of the M365 stack, you need to understand what on-prem workloads you've got that can migrate directly into Microsoft 365. So this is really just another iteration of that, and it's know your users.
Absolutely.
Right? It's get an understanding of who it is that is going to be utilizing the platform. And granted, in this it's not even post-COVID really, is it? I mean, the numbers today are scary.
Shocking,
but this during this COVID era, with such a dispersed workforce and the work from anywhere mentality, really, the sort of work from home, having an understanding of who your employees are, who your users are, and how not necessarily how to tailor the solution to them, but to ensure that it's the right solution to begin with.
Correct. Yeah.
And B, that you're giving them the tool set needed to work collaboratively and productively in this sort of COVID era, right?
Exactly right. You want to understand what's the cost of getting work done for Dan, right? It's a bit like, to use an analogy, right? If you're a bricklayer, for a bricklayer they need a trowel, they need boots, they need a hard hat, they need a belt, they need buckets. The cost of getting their job done, and then it's just the skills to do the work. But if you looked at that and said, hey, I've got a new brickie arriving tomorrow, I'm going to give him 50 trowels and 10 hard hats and 50 belts, the cost to get the job done is way overestimated, and that's the parallel I'm trying to draw for the E5 attribution to Dan when you're using 5% of it. So know your user is bang on. It's understand what those persona and role types need, define that, assign a cost to get work done, if you like. This is what it costs to do that role. Calculate that across a division or a department, and then you can figure out, okay, what this cost base is and what we're paying in entitlements. We're way oversubscribed or we're way undersubscribed for today. And then as your business innovates or evolves, so too do the skills uplift. So Dan does a bit more. The cost of him getting his job is that bit more. You consume more of your E5, your productivity goes up. So it is very much, in a roundabout way, when looking at TCO, you can't just compare what you had to what you now have in 365 and Azure without going through that, know your data, know your device, know your user, and map that out to measure true effectiveness.
Right. And in terms of that, whether it's the cost of ownership or the return on investment, there's the tangibles. I call them the tangibles and the intangibles, right? There's the stuff that and there's the stuff that your financial officer is going to be able to say, well, these are our costs for the hardware and the storage and the compute and the licensing and so on and so forth. So they're the easy things to identify in terms of what your cost savings are in comparison to licensing a single product or a single suite of products in M365.
Yeah.
But there's also the intangibles as well. Do you want to walk us through some of those things that aren't necessarily obvious up front, but when you sit down and consider them, you go, okay, well, there's cost savings here and here and here.
Absolutely.
But they're just not obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by far one of the biggest ones is around, if you look at, say, like PowerX or the Power Platform, right, without getting into the tech, that's embedded in all of 365 and in most of Azure, right? So the ability to automate and workflow certain roles or certain types of tasks is already there. It comes back to that capability piece. Now, if you were to look at, say, something in medical like a nurse and the way a nurse does triage, she's probably got a very robust process that's probably quite antiquated, involves many different systems and platforms to get her job done, right? And you've got 100 nurses, say, in the ER. If you were to look at from the intangible side, it's only beneficial if you were to give those nurses each 2 hours back in their day. Could they triage more patients, or could they do something different that benefits the greater population and the patients or the hospital? Right. So again, those two things are quite intrinsically linked. It's okay. We can identify parts of the business that would benefit from types of automation or innovation improvements to give back to maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours per resource per day to be reused to do something else that's of benefit to the hospital in that scenario or to the client. Right, so that's one that's vastly overlooked. Again, ties back to the original point of entitlement is already there.
Yep.
The assumption is we can't automate because we don't understand and we don't have the skills to do so. So as much as I said the migration success is about the end user experience, be able to get in my scenario there, to get the nurse to a point of taking advantage of an innovative way of working with some automation to allow her to do the parts of her job that she really enjoys, requires some upskill and some investment from that individual, right?
Yep.
But you apply that across the whole department, then you're looking at significant return of time, and to translate that into dollars saved and hard costs, and then you can align that to the benefits achieved for the time they got back. Yep. That's a pretty significant, and you can apply that logic across, from an automation standpoint, across most of what a business will be doing.
Yeah, and as hard as it is, I'm a consultant, but in previous life was an IT admin, and it's really hard for me to say this, but there's cost savings to be had in terms of the headcount that you've got managing your IT infrastructure, right?
Absolutely.
Now, whether that's a cost savings by reducing the headcount, or whether it's a cost adjustment in terms
Reallocation.
of, as you said, by upskilling them into the, away from an IT admin and into almost pseudo DevOps, right?
Absolutely.
In the ability to
Yep.
to automate. There's significant cost savings there.
That is, I mean, an IT admin is a great example. Someone that turns up every day and feeds and waters, a cabinet full of servers.
Yep.
That's all they're doing all day, every day. If you're in a
Yeah.
position where you can make 50% of what they do redundant and then upskill that person to use that 50% of time to do something that step changes the business, it elevates that individual, invests in that individual, and
Yep.
the business gets the return on the back end.
It's the old proactive versus reactive, right? If
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
convert them from being reactive into being proactive, it's a benefit for your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Where should we go from here? I mean, in terms of the total cost of ownership, I mean, there's, I would say, back in the day, it was the old OPEX versus CAPEX argument and those sorts of things. But
Yeah.
by and large, that's sort of gone by the wayside because you can shift hardware refreshes into an OPEX these days anyway.
You can, but I'll tell you, there's another area where you look at kind of known or unknown cost savings is things like tech debt and tech overlap,
Right.
right? So often there are positions where there are things, again, comes back to like most things do, right? Comes to a skills-based coverage, but you'll have legacy systems that have to exist within an organization because it's just the way it is.
Yep.
Right? Things have been written that way and they need to be supported that way. Yet they don't have the skills or experience to innovate away from that legacy, to innovate and move to a modern way of doing things. So there's your legacy cost and support of that legacy equipment, and then there's the if it's true technical debt, it's out of support for hardware maintenance and everything, which you're paying an exaggerated amount to support old hardware.
Yep.
Right. So there's that, and there's the tech overlap, which people often miss. So when people or organizations look at solving business problems purely from that reactive tactical position, we have this problem, we're going to fix it with X. We have this problem, we're going to use more of Y. And more often than not, you find that there's four. I have to find the statistic and the average, but it's between 4 and 6.5 or something pieces of tech that overlap and do similar or the same roles within an organization.
Yep.
Yet they can't surface that. So part of, again, from taking that step back and having kind of that consultative advisory lens, it's like, let's go and look at what's there. Let's surface the insights that say, hey, these four things are all doing similar, if not the same role, yet you have an entitlement, again, in that 365 E5 construct that does all of this.
Yep.
Right? So from a cost-saving perspective, you just need to enable this, and theoretically, you can turn that off. Technical debt goes away, the legacy problem goes away, there's just some upskilling and a little bit of innovation to consume that license that you're already paying for.
Yeah, so to that end, it's about sort of tool consolidation, right?
Yeah.
And looking at reducing the number of disparate systems that you use across your estate or across your user base or whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. And the importance of having an overarching vision or a direction as to where the organization needs to go, and then aligning all of the elements. I think we're going to keep landing back at what are you paying if you've got 4,000 users licensed for E5 and you're using 5% of it.
Yep.
Right? You then got a double bubble problem. You're paying over the top for those licenses. You've got the tech debt, you've got the tech overlap, and you've got these resources out on the periphery that are struggling day to day with legacy systems and platforms, which is making their day to day role somewhat challenging.
Yep.
If you can flip that paradigm, innovate, give these guys all back some time in their day to do the stuff that they're passionate about and they can do, whilst removing some of the tech debt and overlap, consuming more and taking advantage of what you have in your existing subscriptions. We're using E5 as an example.
Yep.
Could be whatever subscription, but leverage more of that, then the cost benefits flow and it's easy to show, rather than just trying to do that comparison. This is what it was costing us in XDC,
Yep.
whatever data center it's in, and this is what it's now costing us in, a public cloud platform.
Yeah, and I guess to that end as well, it's going back to the know your users. I mean, you're talking about licensing, getting an understanding of what the requirements are for the user. There's back in the halcyon days, there was, and it still happens today, companies who are doing lift and shift into Azure from on-prem infrastructure, and they're going, well, this system has 4 vCPUs and 16 gig of RAM, so we'll spin up 4 vCPUs and 16 gig of RAM. And it's like, well, no, you need to understand what the workloads are and what sort of resources it's utilizing. Don't go like for like. So to that end, it's also knowing what your users are, and we'll take healthcare as an example. Nurses who, going back to, they don't need 50 gig of mailbox, right? A 2 gig mailbox may very well be sufficient for them to be able to perform their job and get the emails they need. So they don't need an E5 license. You could look at getting an F license, or so there's cost savings within M365 itself, not just in the migration.
Well, exactly. There's that, and there's also, as you take it down that path, there's the end user compute element to it all, right? So, what does an EUC strategy? What does an EUC strategy look like? Today, these guys all have laptops or tablets, and the nurses have, crash trolleys with a full laptop on it, and all the peripheries and support that needs to go with that. Some modern hospitals, it's all thin clients, but what does EUC look like today? It's very different to what it looked like just 2 years ago.
Right.
And look at the different vendors and things that are available to you to get a desktop to you, a high-performant, highly available desktop that's relevant to, again, shift from, say, health and shift into, like what we're doing now, shift into a design house or an animation house. You're going to have people that absolutely need honking machines that are full of processors and everything else, but you've got other people in that business that don't need that.
Yep.
But that business may say, that's our standard. It's Mac Studios across everybody at 15 grand a go.
Yep.
You're like, actually, no, these people over here could quite healthily run a virtual desktop in the cloud.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? So it's that knowing your user, knowing what they need, and mapping that to how the business functions and where the business benefits are is going to help you arrive at what is the true TCO and ROI within public cloud.
Another sort of hidden cost, though, I mean, it should be at the forefront of people's minds from a security perspective, is the data integrity that you get with migrating your data from traditional file shares, which, as a lot of us know, are prone to ransomware and these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Into M365 and SharePoint and OneDrive, where those issues are neutered, for want of a better term, right?
Well, what's the cost of a breach? I don't want to scare with numbers, but you just go look at the latest reports and look at cost of breach. Yeah. So it's like understanding, again, when it hinges again off the EUC, the end user compute thing we were just discussing. By moving away from, like you say, file shares accessed by laptops or tablets or physical devices over a network to an encompassed platform where the boundary is secure, the devices are secure, the user is understood. So what's normal behavior for Dan? Therefore, we can track and measure that. And what's abnormal behavior for Dan? What's the risk associated with Dan doing business and working the way that he works? Right? It's all of those things feed in. I think you've nailed it with the, know your data, know your user. That is the real way to understand. And it does take that step back and not take that CFO view on why is that more expensive than that.
Yep.
Why is Dan on the same license as Lee? I don't know. Right? If you can clearly delineate why that's the case and it's justified, okay, well, there are 50 of him and 150 of him. That's what the cost base should be. Adjust the licenses accordingly, and there's your saving. Yeah, I
mean, when we're doing consultative engagements, you've got things like functional and non-functional requirements, etc. From a business case for an M365 migration, again, I come back to the tangibles and the intangibles, right? And it's those intangible things that, ultimately the cost of a breach comes down to the individual cost to your organisation for an outage. I've been involved with breaches before, not me doing the breach, that would be unethical, but
fun.
Where a breach of a major multinational that shut down their base of operation in Australia. All their users got sent home for a week because there was nothing that they could do.
So you're right. There's the cost to that, but there's also the cost, the reputational damage and the reputational risk of that breach, right? It depends what kind of business you are, but if there are shareholders, investors, if there are people that use your business and realize you've had a breach, you're going to lose, without a doubt, they're going to lose client base, they're going to lose shareholders, stock price is going to take a hit. So again, it's all very true.
Yeah, and that's one you can't necessarily put a price tag on that. I mean, ultimately you could. What's the value of your organization? What's the market cap, for want of a better term? But that's the sort of, dare I say it, scare tactics that can be employed within a business case to say, this is what we're vulnerable to right now. If not M365, we need to implement something that safeguards us against that. And the cost associated with that is this much. And,
Absolutely. Look, I think I've touched on a few points. If you put the user at the center of everything, call it user, call it my client, call it my crew. If you put the individual at the center of everything and you understand how the user operates and needs to function in the role that you put them in, and you build out the layers around that user, around the identity, the security identity, the access, the device, the way you deliver the device, and so on and so forth, you're building a robust platform for that individual to get their work done and at a known cost base that's appropriate rather than everything we've discussed. So I think that's a core message.
It is, and that, I guess, leads into also the productivity side of it all, right? We're talking, outside of the security aspect with MFA and so on and so forth, we're talking, improved productivity through unified products, through, seamless,
100%.
what was I going to say? Seamless sort of UI and UX across disparate and different devices, whether it's PC, Mac, phone, tablet. You get that unified user experience across all of those platforms, which just assists with the increase in productivity
massively. Yeah. Look, being a Mac person, I don't know if Dan, you're a Mac or a Windows person, but I have both. But for a long time on Mac, they had handoff between devices, which was one of the best things ever. Start something on your iPhone, pick it up on your iPad, you could finish it on your Mac. It was great. Right, that's now there. It's been there for a while across all the 365. So no matter what device I use, Windows or Mac, I can start at A and finish at Z and have productivity the whole way through. Right, so that's again a great measure of how you get work done. The piece that people often miss, though, again, is that capability component to this. There's an assumption or a belief that I'm going to give Dan all of these tools, and just magically he's going to just do all of this stuff. It's just going to happen. So you're a tech guy, you're going to figure it out. But if you apply that to my analogy of, say, nurses, these people save lives. They don't know tech, right? So if the assumption is I'm going to give Sally and Pete these wonderful devices and all this capability and it's going to boost their productivity and they're going to be amazing, if you don't put them at the center and take them along for the journey and empower them and measure them as they go, it falls on its face. So you're back to square one. You're paying for the outcome. You're not getting the bottom line result. Right?
And that comes back to just good communications to your end users. It's only productive if the users know how to use the tools, if they've been demonstrated how to use them.
Correct.
And there's an element of train the trainer within the organization. You need that information being passed between crewmates. Otherwise, it just gets in the way. It becomes too hard, and it's like, I'm not doing that because I end up spending half an hour on that, whereas I should be seeing patients.
Yeah. Well, you're right. You need champions of change, right? You need people that believe in and can actually, the working proof is there. Hey, Dan, I know we're in similar roles. I've been on a pilot for the last 3 months, and I'm now working this way. It's given me back an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, which has allowed me to really up level and do this. This person here is just like, I want a piece of that. Like, I'm still doing this. I'm still doing stuff this way. That's on the ground. That happens, right? But when you're stepping back from your original question around how do I measure the true ROI and TCO, it's not always dollars. It's retention of people, right? Retaining the people that you have, investing in the people, and attracting really good talent.
Yeah.
I was just on a call week before last, with a university where their sole mission is we want to be the first and only choice for students because of what we can offer. And they have a whole mission statement around their platforms and what they offer. So they're getting students because they say, I want to go to that uni because I get X, Y, and Z. The experience is flawless. It's innovative. It's up there. It's forward thinking. I'm not going to be given devices and be working in the dark ages. I want a piece of this. And they're dead set on it. Right.
Awesome. I think we could continue talking about this, but I think we could.
Day, mate,
but I think we've maybe hit a natural jumping off point for now, and maybe we'll have to come back into a second episode on this because, it's important and almost imperative that you get it right, in order to get that over the line.
100%. 100%. I think if you want to, I would underline it by saying everything we've discussed today is the thinking hat that needs to go on before you even consider looking at what the TCO and the ROI is. When you consider everything we've discussed, you can go and do some investigation. You can go and do some consulting to understand it all. And if it is a case of there's a migration or whatever, there's a transitional piece that needs to happen, going into it what the outcome needs to be and how to measure it and how to get the most out of it. So, next time we can talk about that potential path of how you get there.
Yeah, I mean, the podcast was never about telling you what your ROI is or what your total cost of ownership is, because that varies from business to business. It's really about
it's just how to think about
laying the framework for the listener to go and start to put together what works for them in terms of their organisation.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would mention, and I have done this I think in every episode so far, is I have a second topic section in the show notes, and it's just PowerShell. With all of this, I mean, I know that this isn't related to ROI, but in terms of maybe it is your IT staff, your IT admins, any aspect of M365 or Azure, you need to know PowerShell. So go out and learn PowerShell.
Yeah.
And then lastly for me, and I'll even give you the final word if you like, Lee, but go and sign up for the M365 developer program. So this is, I guess Microsoft provides you with a 60-day trial of the full suite. So anyone out there who wants to get their hands dirty with the technology before or while they're putting together a business case to understand the tool sets that are available and the products that are on offer, go and sign up for the program, get your hands dirty, dive right in, set up email and Teams for the family and see how it works out. But I would always recommend that. Any last thoughts from you, Lee, before we sign off?
Mate, a bit of a curveball in the same vein as what you've just said. Everything we've discussed, the way to surface all of this information is the data's there, right? You just need to aggregate it and surface it. So in the same way as you say PowerShell, I would say Power BI, Power BI, right? Go and get across Power BI and use Power BI. Get out of spreadsheets, get out the way that you collate information. Use Power BI to aggregate data and surface true insights from the data that you've got, so you can make decisions based on data rather than an assumption or a gut.
I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but I think there's honesty in what I'm about to say, and that is that Power BI is great, particularly for including nice, pretty graphs in your business case, because management love pretty graphs, right? They love the fluff. So, yes, I would actually second that. Power BI is a great tool for data visualization and getting an understanding. Yeah. So, I think we're done. I think we'll wrap up now.
Cool, mate. That was brilliant.
Lee, awesome having you on. This was a great conversation. I look forward to doing it again with you.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure,
everyone,
mate.
Thank you for joining in, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.